Retro continues to grow bigger and better than ever, and few come as big, bad and bombastic as Sarah Connor, Cyberdyne Systems, Carl Reese and the Terminator. UK developer Bitmap Bureau have been slowly creating old, new games across modern and retro hardware, but their latest is a huge coup from them. Terminator 2 is a brand new 2D platformer that looks to have travelled into the future from the past. One that has struggled to match pixel quality to film, but this binary retro nostalgic new entry could rectify those long-standing wrongs. A love note to a lost era in movies and games, and a title and series of films that I just had to talk about some more following my database episode ahead of its multi-platform release this year. Come with me if you want to play.
Come on! What day is it? What year?
The Terminator was one of the most impactful and long-lasting stories in modern cinema, not quite launching Arnold Schwarzenegger's career, but certainly pushing him higher into the public sphere. As much as it did for director James Cameron, far more than his infamous Piranha 2 debut. This B-movie horror sequel came from his days working for Roger Corman as a model and FX artist, and then later for John Carpenter on Escape from New York. But even following that, he was destined for bigger things, and the Terminator was a product of the 80s and its obsession on computers, androids, AI, and cyborg future mixed with nuclear war, acid rain, and Armageddon. The film was a hit, but the then blossoming video rental market helped this small independent film reach mass market and turn that tiny $6 million budget even then into tens of millions for Hemdale and Orion, two great studios. On a personal note, this was where I saw it first, at the video shop I worked at. It was an 18 here in the UK in 1985, as that rating had only recently been changed from the older X certificate. It later dropped to a 15 in the 90s. The movie was a popular rental for Rank Video. We had about 20 copies if memory serves at first when it was released. But I digress. The impact of Terminator in the low and high budget movie world was fast and strong. From the Italian Terminator meets Over the Top in 1986 Fists of Steel, to more slasher stalker horror style versions such as The Vindicator and Class of 1999 School for Cyborgs that were inspirations for the Terminator as a whole, specifically John Carpenter's Halloween. Albert Pine had two attempts, Nemesis with Olivier Gruner in 1992 and the bigger hit with Jean-Claude Van Damme's Cyborg earlier in 1989. Even Murphy himself owes a debt to the impact of the cyborg assassin.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Hey, buddy, did you just see a real bright light?
Getting the Terminator made was a careful balance of almost every element of the filmmaking process, something James Cameron has done since directing, casting a largely low-key and even unknown lead cast, peppered with a few veterans. Linda Hamilton was not a big star. Fresh off The Children of the Corn the same year, she was unknown, and although the Stephen King horror film did well, Terminator was her biggest role yet. Michael Biehn was the same, even more unknown, with only a 70s stalker slasher movie The Fan to lean on, and some bit parts in Hill Street Blues.
But these are new. They look human. Very hard to spot.
I am not stupid, you know. They cannot make things like that yet.
They were both exceptional in the movie, as we know, highlighting that great acting is not just dependent on the actor's pedigree. Now, originally, James Cameron's close friend Lance Henriksen was going to play the titular role. Even the original designs are his face, and he helped secure funding with Hemdale and others. He was given the comic cop relief role that was cut heavily back in the final film, but the star James wanted from the off was Arnold, who came in for the role of Reese, but quickly became obvious that Titanium Terror was the gambit for Cameron. Arnie was a rising star by now, and the 70s Pumpin' Iron reality show-like movie put him on the radar, and after Conan, he was becoming a rising star for the 80s. Contrary to popular stories of a fever dream in Rome by Cameron himself while making Piranha 2, I recall in an imaginatively titled magazine we used to get in our video shop here in the UK, Film Review, James was interviewed and stated he wrote the premise much earlier, during the 1979 production of Corman's Star Wars clone, Battle Beyond the Stars, of which he managed the impressive effects for. The story was tweaked and improved during the years between, with wife yet to be Gail Nan Hurd, who also worked for Corman on this and prior films.
Nice try, Hot Blood.
You're heartless. You're just like Sador.
Sador?
The low budget of the movie, along with Arnold's $750,000 fee, necessitated both restrictions and creative thinking for the production team, an area where James Cameron's prior Corman apprenticeship and visual effects work paid dividends, alongside Fancy 2 Film Effects, who delivered all of these under the lead of the late, great Gene Warren Jr. Now, unlike today, all effects in TV or movie were predominantly practical effects. In fact, Star Trek II in 1982 was the first to have a completely CGI shot within a movie, well, 2 in total, and that was less than 2 minutes of the entire film's runtime. So miniatures, prosthetics, smoke, lighting, pyrotechnic, explosions, mechanical, stuntmen, women, and then visual cell effects added on top, often by drawing over the scene a frame at a time by hand, rotoscoping, and shooting the composite. For the Terminator, Fancy 2 focused on building miniature sets, models, vehicles, and even schools. Then by using a mix of controlled sets on Burbank Studios, miniature for background, life-size for foreground, and forced perspective, flooded with smoke, intense lighting and rigs, which are key to enable miniatures to look real when combined with depth of field. They created some amazing sequences that stand up well even by today's standards. The future war sequences, specifically the opening shot and the Kyle flashback sequence, was stunning for the time, even ignoring the budget they had. For example, the skull here is human scale, whilst everything else is miniature, including the explosions. Going back to the basics such as Thunderbirds or Joe 90, these are all shot at high 80 or 120 FPS film rates, again adding cost to slow these down, which provides a sense of scale and heft. From the flying hunter-killer overhead, or even the ground-based ones that exploded, all radio controls or on wires. They're all inches in size but appear massive, and these were then mixed with real actors in a studio using rear projection on large screens to blend them together in real time, often convincing it was a single shot and set, such as this great shot here, which is 3 split projection screens panned across a real set. Using props as shot blocking, these blend the 2 areas together. You can see the first screen, the nearest one here on the right, pauses whilst the left one starts, continuing the run from behind the real rubble, an animated miniature hunter-killer in the back, again all off screen. This is an in-camera effect, and it is a vital piece in the film's FX quality, and much cheaper and faster than almost any other option back then. The truck explosion was another, a recreation of the real downtown LA police musicians building scene shot a week earlier and then matched up seamlessly to go from 46 individual explosions that expand up the tanker into the cabin, which they got wrong in the first take and had to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. Again, all shot at high FPS, Linda Hamilton then runs in front of the rear projection of this shot on a studio with matching lighting and scale scenery to sell the illusion. Now, like many great filmmakers, the trick here is to use all means, cheats, methods, and hacks necessary to achieve the aims as quickly, economically, and convincingly as possible, which they did. Now, at the time, films were keen to have payoff or key sequences to draw the audience in and impress, shock, or amaze. In fact, when I worked in video shops in the 80s and early 90s, we would often get films left at big scenes in the movie. This was a big reason why rewinding tapes became a big request on customers. Now, the late great Stan Winston delivered many of these within that same tight budget and schedule. The film has many FX shots, but 2 main sequences they crafted illustrate the passion and ingenuity the team had, again driven by Cameron's own. The completely burnt away endoskeleton T-800 that attacked Sarah and Carl in the factory final scene, and the famous T-800 repair scene in the motel room. Now, recall at this point, we only knew of the things Reese had told us about the Terminator, by proxy to Sarah. Here, though, was the monsters reveal, that payoff sequence. James Cameron originally wanted all endoskeleton shots to be stop motion, but Stan Winston convinced him that it needed to be a mix of animation and animatronics for the final film, which of course he was right on. Doug Beswick, known for Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, built the 2-foot high scale model, around 1/3 of the 6-foot animatronic one Stan Winston's team designed and built. This was then animated at 24 frames per second by the late Peter Klenov, used in the scene where it emerges from the exploded tanker and mixed into the factory showdown, again with rear projection used. Now, Stan Winston used a life-size mechanical model and mixed up into upper and lower torso and limb shots. They struggled a little with the movement and mix of terrifying presence due to the complexity and weight of the model sitting atop its operator's shoulders. It still looks superb, and the iconic design carries a great deal of the impact. The repair scene was a more standard mix of false latex arm and mechanical piston-driven ligaments or actuators, moulded at the wrist with the money shot using a real hand coming through a hole in the table to sell the illusion of home DIY. The bigger, more visceral shot was the full animatronic cast of Arnie's head, as he cuts out his damaged eyeball covering, exposing the real camera lens underneath, which at this close-up is actually a huge false eyepiece with a camera underneath for the iris. Now the animatronic puppet is moved by both hand inside and mechanical controls, giving it a definite robotic, almost clockwork motion look. Real hands again wrapped around the head to do all the surgery, and it stands up brilliantly, before blending back to the real Arnie as he dons his legendary gargoyle glasses with Arnold's own hands before popping off to the station. The quality and range of both visual and practical effects in the movie really impressed me in '85, and the intelligent solutions, quality and art driving the techniques still do today. Such as this shot, which was a steel mechanical fake arm beside Arnie, who pretends to punch through the windscreen, but the car isn't really moving. Instead, the brick wall behind is moving. It's being dragged backwards to create the illusion of the car reversing. All that effort and skill for a sub 2 second shot, all real in camera with actors in one night, which sadly would now all be green screen CGI in post. Now it did receive mixed reviews by the mainstream UK movie reviewers upon release, certainly Arnold did himself, yet quickly gained traction and reach by more cinemas and certainly video shops, something common in the 80s and 90s. But the Stan Winston animatronics, Fantasy II visual effects, actors, crew, Gail and James were a huge reason it stood out and still holds up today.
Anything else?
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
Hey, just what you see, pal.
But this titanium tale of future AI domination, perfect killing machines, quickly struck a chord with a huge audience. Surprisingly, not for Arnie himself, who caused a 9-month delay on shooting due to Conan the Destroyer contractual commitments. Now, whilst making that movie, he was interviewed about his thoughts before shooting had started. He called it a few weeks' work on some shit B-movie. He chastised himself about this in his memoirs book, Total Recall, and that he quickly changed his mind after seeing the dailies. Ironically, coming from his Conan role that had pushed his career forward as the leading man and hero, it would be his metamorphosis into a cinematic villain that would cement it. On a third of Destroyer's budget, but almost twice the revenue, becoming one, if not the most famous character he portrayed.
That Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
There was a guy here this morning looking for him, too.
Yeah, big guy on a bike. Does that got something to do with this?
No. I wouldn't worry about him.
But as big as the Terminator was, T2 blew the cinema world apart and improved on everything, least of all budget. At just over $100 million, it was the most expensive movie ever made at that point, and in no small part due to the consortium of owners the IP had. Hemdale being paid off by Carolco, Gale Ann Hurd's divorce settlement from James Cameron at the time, the most expensive dollar ever, plus his director's fee. In total, a third of the movie's entire budget was spent before a foot of film was shot. Arnie's Gulfstream 3 private jet for his services was part of that receipt.
Easy money.
But the groundbreaking special effects remain the lion's share. Continuing the brilliance of the first, the largely same team in Winston Studios, Fantasy II Film Effects, raised their game significantly, but now joined by ILM and their new CGI toolkit. What I love about the movie is the amount of, again, real in-camera effects and far more than many think. But the mix of techniques, planning and logical solutions are superb and sadly now rarely thought of, let alone used by most. The hospital scene uses a simple camera trick by shooting Robert Patrick walking through the frame without bars and then another shot with, and his hand is then squeezed through the bars. These two shots are then merged with a blend technique, now not all CGI, but more a blend of old school effects of frame painting and a computer generated morph. The gun being stopped was just a clever add to the edit that grounds the T-1000 and its limits. Simple, yet effective. Now, the arm repair scene from Terminator 1 was reborn and enhanced with a full animatronic arm attached to Arnold's shoulder. Latex foam skin was covered over the articulated limb, with the forearm housed inside a pre-cut section that could easily be ripped away. Arnold rubbed the knife across these sections with a blood tube attached to the knife, pumping a little blood to sell the slice. Then the metallic looking endoskeleton had jelly lumps and blood added to connect the organic cover once ripped off. All practical and more convincing than CGI. Now, sure, you can see the cable under Arnie's t-shirt, but the effect is brilliant, as is the full puppet head split used in the lift shot, which splits apart on cue and can move and even close up. But this was mixed with ILM CGI to heal between the prosthetic head, the CGI animation, and the real Robert Patrick shot scene. Now, this mix was used often for the T-1000 effects, such as the bullet holes which were stuck on prosthetic for much of the shots, but they all healed at once to save CGI cost and time at the end. Prosthetic head with a hole right through it, the exploded body, and even split down the side with a bar were all achieved largely in camera, on set, by physical creation, skill and clever camera angles, and even smarter thinking by Stan Winston Studios. In fact, the style and human mutation look always reminds me of the majesty of Robertine's still legendary effects in 1982's The Thing. Now, Fantasy 2 get the last word here, delivering a huge portion of the some 150 FX shots in Terminator 2 from a miniature stop-motion Arnold on the truck before sliding into a steel smelting factory to the drastically improved Future War opener, which combines almost every technique in the library, let alone the book, as covered in Part 1. Post the chillingly realistic nuclear explosion created by Forward Productions, we get another piece of magic with the Future War. Life-size schools are panned across as an animatronic T-800 endo stamps down on this clearly pre-split head. This is controlled by one of Winston's crew with a removable bar in the leg. Pulled away as the camera pans up, then miniature stop motion and real sets with, again, rear projection screens all merge within camera effects. This short sequence still blows me away. The two endoskeletons here are all stop motion by Peter Klenov, with the two screens in the back split by a real set piece as a blocker. Sound familiar? Real lights were flashed on the shots across a few frames, emulating laser fire, and these are animated walking over schools and looking for humans. Finally, the last two top half only Terminators are full size animatronic, and these are controlled underneath by an operator in front of all these screens, real time, live in camera. All of this is pulled together as one by the rotoscope painted layers and light reflection on the metal that travel perfectly from the back screen to the foreground, creating a single action scene with depth in post. Now, these are painted in time with the movement, light and explosions. Now, sadly, a cameraman was terminated during this final shot, but I'm sure you'll agree it was a life well spent. Now, the entire shot and more here highlights why top draw practical effects can beat almost all CGI and are often cheaper. Now, take this hunter-killer shot, again a model on wires, flies through a miniature set, real explosions and lights, but running on a huge rear projection screen with real actors in front, again blended with a perfectly timed light in video and then on set as it goes through the explosion, and again lasers join the two seamlessly within the frame. It personified the emerging big-budget, high-octane action CGI movie future. From the biggest band of the time, Guns N' Roses' You Could Be Mine hit, Stan Winston at his prosthetic best, Fantasy 2 outdoing themselves in all areas, and ILM raising the visual bar and future yet again, with Arnie, Linda, Robert Patrick and James firing on all cylinders. It was and remains a cultural smash in pacing, action, authentic character development, devoted but fixated mother and a father and son coming of age story, opening with a juxtaposed repeat of the first film's time travel arrivals and comedy touches, machine learning AI, incredible confrontation sequences, tension fueled chase sequences and emotional moments peppered groundbreaking spectacle and effects. It stands as the pinnacle of the series, which has sadly fallen foul to the modern curse of oversaturation and erasure.
Hey, I got a full house.
Must be my lucky day.
Now, the first two films stand on their own merits and differ significantly as products of their time. The Terminator is a dark neon noir stalker movie with a cyborg, and the heroine wins and the hero and villain die. See Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, et al. The film is relatively somber, shot at night for visuals and budget reasons, and creates a very 80s moody atmospheric film with a message on the then prominent nuclear war threat, emerging computer AI, connection and automated future yet to come.
The Terminator had already gone through. Connor sent me to intercept and they blew the whole place.
Well, how are you supposed to get back?
I can't. Nobody goes home. Nobody else comes through. It's just him and me.
T2 is a far brighter, upbeat, hopeful even story. Still a large mix of day and night, but tonally more positive, comedic, wisecracks and explosive. Robert Patrick does steal the limelight, being a perfect mix of cat-like stealth and guile, mixed with intelligence and an intimidating presence that is equal to Arnie's physical power and presence, but not the same. But the film presents a distillation of the then pop culture, from Beverly Hills Cop to Guns N' Roses, with a boy and his robot buddy cop tale with heart, both perfectly suited to video games, and yet we had to wait until the sequel came about before we got any at all, but the wait was not worth it in many cases. But that is a story for part 2, and the history of the original Terminator games, good and bad, across 8-bit, arcade and 16-bit machines. Now, if you're really excited, you can actually watch that part 2 right now over on my Patreon page for a few dollars or pounds a month, along with other exclusive videos, early access videos, chats, and even requests and answers on my database videos, or even video subjects to cover in future episodes. And it's only £1 or £2 per month to support my fully independent and self-funded work, website, and more. So if you can, subscribe, join my Patreon, share, like, and comment down below. But more importantly, be aware that I do not make any money really off this project. It's a passion project that I do on the side. For example, this particular video, as I now know, has been fully claimed by YouTube, and therefore I'm making zero money on it at all. Therefore, everything that paid for this video comes from the Patreon people that have supported me over the years, who I greatly appreciate, and I wouldn't make this effort if they weren't doing this. But you can help me do more by joining those teams. Anyway, I'm out, but I'll see you very soon for part 2 and more in the future.
Now, don't take this the wrong way, but you are a Terminator, right?
Yes. Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.